Hello, and welcome to Remembering Together, the LMJ's podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harrold. Each month, we explore the many ways Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia touch our lives, from personal stories of families affected by this disease to the ongoing efforts to find a cure. Join us as we raise awareness, share support, and learn together about the impact of Alzheimer's on nearly 7 million people worldwide. Let's remember together and work toward a future where no one faces this disease alone. Welcome to Remembering Together, an LMJ's Lost Souls podcast. We have made it all the way to episode number 5. The first time I did this, I didn't think we were making it past episode 1. So here we are. We got a whole handful. I want to introduce myself, number one. For those of you who have already forgotten on previous podcasts, I like to talk about myself. So my name is Matt Harrold. I am the vice president of LMJ's Lost Souls Alzheimer's Fund. Today, I have a very special guest all the way from Flemington, New Jersey. We have an Alzheimer's supporter who has combined his love of music with his personal connection to Alzheimer's disease. He has a career as a research scientist. He writes musicals. His Frankenstein adaptation musical was off Broadway for 3 years. Without further ado, I want to introduce Eric Sirota, who is a research scientist by day and musical theater writer by night. Eric, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Eric, want to first let our audience know if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself. You're coming to us from a distance away. We're all the way here in Illinois. So tell us about yourself, tell us about New Jersey, and tell us about Flemington.
Okay, well, I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn. I moved out here about 39 years ago when after I got my doctorate in physics and I've been working here ever since. I also have been interested in writing musical theater and then started doing it more seriously and then even more seriously. And then finally had an off-Broadway show that ran 3 years and have been developing other works. So Flemington is sort of in semi-rural a little bit. There's a farm in our backyard, like right behind us is a farm. So that part of New Jersey, and not too far from New York, though. After Frankenstein, I wrote a few other things. So my connection to Alzheimer's, I might as well just jump into that. Well, my father, who is a psychiatrist, had Alzheimer's. And in his last years, the only way to reach him was singing songs he knew earlier in life. And I decided I wanted to write a musical touching on the power of music to rekindle memory and awaken the mind. And
Eric, Eric, I love you went right into it there, and obviously a very personal reason that you got involved with how we are here today is something very personal. But just find it amazing how you decided to, as you said, get serious and then get real serious with musicals. You kind of want to lay out, obviously, know you have a family, know you're a family man as well. So before we jump into your dad, you want to tell us a little bit about your family, your wife, your kids, and that?
So my wife, Carol London, is an artist. Some of her art supplies and a few things are behind me, but actually there's paintings everywhere else in the house. So she's an artist, and I have 2 kids in the late 20s. My daughter is a medical student, and my son is a software engineer. And we're empty nesters at this point. So those are these are my family. My father had been a psychiatrist, and my mom was a nutritionist, college professor.
Wow. You got a variety of brains and a variety of educational things there throughout the family. I know we got into a little bit about your dad. So if you want to, let's start there and kind of we'll go a little bit out of order because how you landed in off Broadway and that is a very interesting story as I've gotten to know you here. So tell us a little about your dad.
Okay, well, my father, as well, both my parents were sort of big supporters of everything I did, including my musical pursuits. I'm sure they were happy I chose to go into the sciences, which was my passion. That wasn't like, oh, I did that for the money. The science is also my passion, and my interest in music. And I always like to write things, and in fact, when I started writing, my first musical was Frankenstein. I started writing in 1981. My mom had taken me to a preview performance of a Broadway play based on Mary Shelley's novel, and that was a very famous production because it was the biggest loss of any Broadway thing at the time. It closed after one performance. We saw a preview. But when I saw Mary Shelley's Frankenstein adapted for stage as a play, I was thinking, this needs to be a musical. The emotion in it was so strong that in the story that that it needed to be a musical, maybe even an opera. I was very familiar with opera at the time. And as musicals started getting to the almost sung through, much more music in them, like Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar was sort of influential. It said, okay, that has a home in musical theater. I didn't know much about writing musicals. I did know about writing music. And I started to write the musical before I knew about structure of musicals. I just started writing songs, adapting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein while I had just started grad school. And the story spoke to me both intellectually and emotionally. I was far from the home, far from the girl I loved, and starting to get a degree in science, like Victor Frankenstein. And so the story really spoke to me. I didn't have too much time to write during grad school, but I made very, very slow progress, a song here and there. It wasn't until I landed in New Jersey and I was working as a scientist, I had a little more time. And I started writing and finishing it as a musical. And we had, in 1990, an amateur production in the science lab as an after-work extracurricular activity, putting up my first draft. Now, I didn't know that you don't fully stage a production of your first draft, but I did. And my father and my parents, so they were divorced by that point, but they came to it and extremely proud of that accomplishment. And that at the time was one of the biggest deals, where I had 65 of my colleagues involved in the production of my first draft.
Eric, that is amazing too, because as I hear you say that, to kind of give the audience an idea of a little bit of persistency, that's 9 years. You talked about where it started, 1981 to 1990, and then as we can all hope for, as we age and as we do different things, nothing like having your parents being some of your biggest cheerleaders in that. So that's obviously very touching as we talk about your connection with your parents and obviously your dad as we talk here today. So really cool to hear that for the audience. Don't give up. 9 years of doing something, and here you are, not even doing it. You're just, like you said, rough draft kind of time, but that's really impressive.
Yeah, and so then from there, I realized other parts of my life took precedence. My day job at work and my day job, my career, I was spending a lot of time on that. A family, we got married shortly after, then had kids, bought a house, and my music writing sort of got compressed. All my studio, all my equipment ended up getting put in the closet for almost a decade. And my wife's painting career, I spent a lot of time sort of, helping put up shows and do her website and all that. And then with a little more time on my hand around maybe 2012, 2002, I started coming back to it. I had a little more time, a little an hour a night, and when we were on vacation, and I started going back to musical theater writing, and then started learning what I had to learn. I had to learn that the two musicals I had already started writing, and actually the third I had started, I had to rewrite. I needed to restructure them. I learned about the structure of musical theater. I went to workshops in New York at the ASCAP Musical Theater Workshops, which I started going to them for the second time in around 2007, and listening to musicals in works in progress or in development being critiqued by Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked and Pippin and Godspell, and a panel of other sort of experts, people practicing musical theater, writing or directing, and critiquing other people's work, the people who were being presenting. I wasn't presenting, thank God, because they always really tore apart the work there. But I was applying all of their comments and criticism vicariously to what I was working on, and really started to learn how to write. And after each of these evenings, so it turned out, I lived in central Western New Jersey, but my father lived right across the street from Lincoln Center, near where ASCAP was. So I would go to his apartment every time afterwards, and we would talk about the works that were being presented and discussing those details. And then I would also, he would ask about what I'm writing and, how that was affecting what I'm writing. And he was, having these discussions with him was very, influential on what I was doing. And and then a few years later, I started having my connections to the New York musical development community, the people actually doing theater and new works, and had my first show at it was in a little festival, a 15-minute work at the West Village Musical Theater Festival, and was so proud of that work, and then joined a group called Theater Resources Unlimited, which used to be a New York-based group, but after the pandemic, it basically spread nationally and internationally, because once everyone went virtual, they called their friends somewhere else and said, hey, dial into these meetings. And then once the pandemic ended, they couldn't go back to in person because all their people were everywhere else. And a lot of the people who lived in New York, theater people before, ended up moving out to the suburbs and a little further away anyway. So, and that was an organization which was so both giving. Everyone sort of helped mentor people, and then they had official things to do, speed dates with producers and writers, and director and writer interaction workshops, communication workshops, and that helped me develop not just as a writer, but also learning how to go through the steps of your first draft to getting it on the stage. And so I had another work, Go My Child, not Go My Child. That one was Your Name on My Lips, about a young artist and a young musician. And they end up going their separate ways at the end of the story when they're 20 years old. And I had staged readings of that. And I went from one level of staged reading to another, and then eventually productions at Theater for the New City. And I met a whole bunch of people in the business. A couple of my music directors have been doing Broadway. Ted Arthur, one of his first gigs in New York was doing my show. Now I can't afford him. He basically had been the main music director for Back to the Future, the Broadway musical, and I think he's on that on tour now. So he's doing Broadway big time.
And, you're the reason people got a big break, is what you're trying to say. I mean, that's how big of a deal.
I was lucky enough to catch them early. I could afford when my
I love it.
Can afford them, but it was really, and these people. I was sort of older in my number of years, not my experience in musical theater. Some of the people were right out of conservatory. They were the people who were doing this as their main profession, and some other people like that. And I learned from all the people. Some writers go into the process and are sort of, the joke is, how many playwrights does it take to change the light bulb? And the answer is, I won't change anything, because the idea of the writer, it's like, no, you can't change a word in my script. And it's like, no, I want your ways. I want to learn from the director. I want to learn from the actors, learn from the musicians, to be a better writer and to improve my work. So I had my Frankenstein, which there were like a few things I was writing, sort of developing them. They were all sort of different. One was Go My Child. It was a story, sort of like a fictionalized story of biblical Abraham and Sarah in the part of their early lives, which is not talked about, a larger cast musical. I have Frankenstein, a very specific, smaller cast musical, and I had a semi-contemporary romance with young people. And so I was developing them, like, okay, what's the next step for the next one, and doing what I could. And Frankenstein got into the New York Musical Theater Festival, or NYMF, a very prestigious festival, and it had a staged reading there. And then after that, and after my other show had a production at Theater for the New City, a producer I had met 5 years earlier, who I've sort of been in touch with over that time, said, "Oh, he has the time to do it. My work is ready to do it. It has been developed enough. The timing is right," and helped put Frankenstein in the off-Broadway theater at St. Luke's, where it ran for 3 years. It was a low-budget production, but it didn't run 8 shows a week. It was just a show or two a week. But it ran continuously from 2017 all the way up till the 12th, was it the 12th or the 9th of March, the 2020, when the pandemic shut down the world. And so, having that substantial off-Broadway run was quite significant. And it was in the middle of that run when it was like, okay, I'm going to see the show every day. It's there. It's usually some person I know might show up. I want to be there. I want to write something new. And I had, I was thinking, well, what do I want to write about? And I knew that I wanted to write that show that dealt with Alzheimer's. I just didn't know what the story would be. I wanted to write a musical touching on the power of music to rekindle memory and awaken the mind. Okay, but what's the story? Well, it turned out that I had been accepted to a artist residency at Chateau Orquevaux in France, which was a residency my wife had been accepted to. And then when she found out that musicians or writers can also apply to it, not just painters, I applied to, and I got the grant, and we went there together. And this was like 4 months in advance. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be there for 15 days, and I want to write. I don't want to sit and ponder and angst over what to write. I wanted to write. So I have to have a project. I had to think it through. And I knew that writing a musical, I didn't want to write a single song until I had storyboarded the whole thing. So I knew what it was going to be. I knew what songs would be where, what those songs were doing. What's the purpose of the song? How is the song going to move the plot forward? Those are things that you have to do if it's going to be a good, compelling musical. And I had learned that already before I wrote a single word. And so I had time to plan this out, but I still didn't even have the story. At that, just around that same week, I had gone to make a condolence call to a friend whose mother had passed away from Alzheimer's. And we had been comparing stories about, the music and, my father and the singing. Well, it turned out her mom had been a cellist, actually a professional cellist. And she had told me that when her mother couldn't even sing anymore, if they played music that she had played on the cello before, they played cello music on their, device, iPad or iPod, whatever at the time, for her, she would be in like perfect form, holding her hands as though playing the cello, not like air cello, but like perfect form. Like the muscle memory came back, and she was there and like experiencing it. And that was that was such a powerful image. And also, I think a little bit later, I found this thing on YouTube with a dancer, sort of doing the same things, sitting in a wheelchair, just in a chair, unable to move, and doing but mostly with the upper body, things like the exact moves in the dance she had done. And there was a video and like a motion picture movie of it from her youth when she was a young dancer. Totally. Well, in any case, the idea of the cello, I knew what my story would be. On the way home, driving home, 5-minute drive home from making that condolence call, I had sort of put the script together in my head. And the reason is that a musical I had previously written, Your Name on My Lips, well, I said it was about an artist and a musician, a cellist, who go their way at the end. They go their separate ways to live, separate but happy lives and successful lives. And she had been a cellist, and part of that story is she gives up the cello when she goes away to college and gives up the young man who loved her. And that is what that story is about. I had my characters. I had my backstory. These two characters, an artist and a musician with a compelling backstory, have gone their separate ways. 50 years later, she has Alzheimer's. They've both been widowed since then, and something happens. They are brought together, and that was enough to basically put the story together, because I had my characters and I had a compelling backstory with enough stuff in it to actually give me the hint on how they would connect together. And so then for the next 4 months, I wrote that story. I wrote this, like, write the songs. If I had a little musical idea in my head, I would put it down in notes. I would either record it or put a few notes in the staff, but wouldn't set out to write the song. If I had some lyric ideas, I would just put them down. And more or less what I was doing was laying out my story, the order that things would happen, what would happen, who the other characters would be, their details, and which were the moments for songs and what those songs would be about. And when I went to the workshop, I wrote 15 songs in those 2 weeks and filled in a lot. So I was just writing morning, noon, and night, not angsting. And then for the rest of the year, by the end of the calendar year, by the end of 2019, because that was summer of 2019, I had a sort of first draft. And the next spring, I was going to start developing it. I would get demos recorded. I would have the staged readings or table readings and do stuff. And March of that year, the world shut down. And it's like, okay, I'm not doing those things. Except that the next things I had to do, I didn't need to do in person. Recording the demos, I could send out tracks to any of the professional musicians I had already known, those who are now out of work and moved back to their parents' house and wherever they were, it didn't matter. Or actually someone I had connected with a long time ago who had actually been in Les Mis on Broadway at some point. And these people recorded my demos. Virtually, I mixed them. And then I got to do table reads virtually because you could. Doing just a reading on Zoom, that was easy. And then I could play the songs in the midst of the table reading, and then work on dramaturgy. And dramaturgy, for people who don't know what it is, and I didn't know what it was, 15 years ago. People still talk of dramaturgs sometimes as script doctors. It's not quite that, but they help you work on your script. You could have a dramaturg that actually works for a producer or a director on dramaturging a production, but for a writer, a good one will ask you the questions that will get you to the right place and help you solve problems you have in your script, or maybe find others or ask if those are issues. And that is extremely helpful. Well, I was able to do all of that virtually too. So by the time the pandemic ended, or starting to end, I had a crafted script with 5 table reads, virtual readings. And we even did an outdoor concert. And that outdoor concert it had its songs from my other shows, but it highlighted A Good Day. And it was co-sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association that sort of co-sponsored that outdoor concert in the park during in the break between the variants. So we weren't out of the woods yet, right? People weren't back inside theaters, but we were able to at least gather together enough to rehearse and to put on this presentation. And then another reading with lots of masks. And then it actually, my work won the Original Playwrights Award at the Shawnee Playhouse, a community theater up in the Poconos, not too far from where I live. And they put on a full production of it, which won the Philadelphia area Broadway World's Best New Player Musical. And so it has had an actual full developmental workshop, but production. coming out of the pandemic. And so that's where that project is now. And what I'm really looking for is to sort of get the attention of people who both have like the interest and resources in the theater, and involved in theater in some way, and passion about Alzheimer's and awareness of Alzheimer's, and that to help get this into front of a larger audience, because it sort of needs both the wherewithal in theater and the passion about the subject matter to say, this is a story I want to tell.
No, very interesting, Eric. They're going on the Alzheimer's route a little bit there. I think you have a very interesting connection with music, and the timing of it. When you want to talk about your dad a little bit, and when Frankenstein, as you and I have gotten to know each other, when Frankenstein went into full effect, and the timing of that on what your dad, was experienced with Alzheimer's, and unfortunately on the untimeliness of this. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So when Frankenstein, my father, let's say in 2015, my father was able to attend the thing in the New York Musicals Festival. He certainly had attended the first staged reading, and he was following the work as it was developed. By the time Frankenstein opened off Broadway, he had already passed away. In fact, when Your Name on My Lips had its second and its big production at the Theater for the New City, it opened on March 2nd, 2017. And that was both an opening of an art show, which my wife was in because she had provided all the artwork on stage. It was about a cellist and an artwork, and art plays a major role in the show on stage. So she had not only 16 works or 18 paintings on stage in various parts of the show, but in the lobby art gallery, she had a solo exhibition. And this was the evening of the opening. And that evening, my father went into sepsis, and my brother and sister made the executive decision not to tell us until after the show, because there's nothing we could have done. And then after said, call us when when you're finished. And he said, okay, don't go home, come straight to the hospital. And my father, we got there, and we were by his bedside for a few hours, and he passed away that evening, the day of that show. And during the whole run of the show, it was a very sort of strange occurrence, because people were both, people who didn't know me personally, were just, congratulating me, because I was going to, except for the day of the funeral, I went to most of the performances because I wanted to be around people and my friends and family, instead of making condolence calls to our house, which we couldn't because there was some construction going on here anyway. They came there, and other people also simultaneously, giving me condolences. So that was Your Name on My Lips, which was the story about the cellist and the artist, which ended up being the characters in A Good Day. It wasn't until that fall, when Frankenstein opened off Broadway, and so he had passed by that point. And I remember, and my mom had passed away in 2015, my brother had said that my parents would have been so proud of me.
Hey, you know what? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's it's important to know we live here. You only get so much time with your parents, and I always say that to people when we talk about this a lot. When somebody dies when they're 90, 100 years old, and I always say it's never enough time. And what you want to do is you want to make them proud while they're alive, and then now in the life you're in, you want to continue to make them proud. Really hit home with what you said right there about the timing aspect of this. You know that for me personally, my mom passed away about a week after I got engaged, and it was that feeling that people were telling me, congratulating you on your engagement and mourning with you, and then the light with it, which is what it seems like you've done with what you've been able to accomplish. Is I looked at it like my mom knew I was fine. I was engaged. It was okay for her to go at that point with her battle. It's tough. But as we talk about Alzheimer's, and I appreciate you sharing something so deep because it's frankly saying it stinks. You are not. Don't feel bad, Eric. You're not the first person, and you definitely won't be the last to get choked up on this podcast, me included in it. So, by all means, this is what this is. This is real. This is honest. There. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit, what's one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who has a family member who's experiencing this? We've talked about a few different things, but just something I always like to ask who I'm with. To give their feedback as to something just maybe they might not think about, or maybe they do think about, but just one piece of advice when you have a close family member, friend who's going through this.
Oh, good. Well, one thing is if they don't know that music, even if they're not a musician, everyone has music in their lives from there, that will connect. Even the songs, even things that their parents might have sung to them, or that they might have sung to you when you were a child. That's probably early enough in their life where that's still early that they would still remember those things. And quite honestly, things they sung to you as a child are probably those things that their parents sung to them early on. Unless they were singing Barney songs to you. But, and that connects them if they're from a different place or a different culture. I mean, I've heard of some stories about people who were like immigrants, their childhood language or what their parents sung from some other or their grandparents, things that they knew early on, or just anything that's music that just brings back the memories. One of the things when we sung with my father and we brought in some of the music, it wasn't just that he would start singing with us, my brother or my son on the guitar, and if there was a little piano in that room, if they had this community room where I can play to sing along then. But he would leave. We always would time our visits so that we wouldn't just be leaving him alone, that it would be time for him to go into the dining room with the other people he was with. And they always said that through the whole rest of the day, the evening, he would be at a heightened state of let's say alertness and happiness, and he would be singing. He continued to be singing for the next a few hours. So it actually was having an effect. I think one thing that's important, is also, I guess, that people, outside the people who are not part of your inner circle, but your friends sort of understand what one is going through, because it is so hard on the family, especially the close caregivers. With my father, my sister, my younger sister, lived very close by, and was actually a physician, and lived a block or so away. and so more often, but most importantly, his wife, who is still alive, is still around now. She was his primary caregiver. He was still married. So, that is even more so difficult than on us, but still going in there. And even with my children, we went in there, and when my father didn't recognize them on a teenager, to not be recognized by one's grandparent is devastating. I mean, an adult too, but and in fact, for a while, I would sort of try to ask him questions and just try to find and say, "Oh, he's not really forgetting." Eventually, right? That's when we just started singing. I said, I'm not going to quiz him it. That's
right.
But what interestingly happened is after a little while of singing, and he would then remember something, and if we had some pictures to show him, by that point he would start. If we had some pictures originally, we put them down, and he would say, "Oh, that's my mother. That's some place there." He would remember those things. Wow. After the singing. So, but and one of the things that my musical is not just about the person with Alzheimer's and just the two old people, but about their whole family, about her children, and about in a sense, the caregivers and what they're going through, because that's really hard, and that's something that maybe people who don't experience it don't sort of realize and empathize with. So that's sort of really important. And my musical is not just like trying to educate people, right? I write musicals to take people with me on compelling emotional journeys. That's what I write. But there is obviously a message and a theme in it. And part of my development process while I was writing and developing it, which I didn't say, was to connect with the Alzheimer's care community, the Alzheimer's Association, and make sure I got the facts right. I only knew the facts about my father. I hadn't become an expert on everything Alzheimer's. I wasn't Googling it and everything back then and finding everything about it. I just was, dealing with my father. I wanted to make sure that I represented it generally right. So if people are going to learn about it, they would learn the right things. What's important to know? What characteristics of Alzheimer's weren't just things I saw my father do or behaviors, but things that were more general. And it turned out, when I saw it, turned out to be very general. But I learned a lot in that process. And that was part of the dramaturgy in some sense.
Right.
Getting the facts right. So when someone sees the show and knows about it, they're going to say, "Oh, that's just all fake. They're just using it as a prop," which occurs in some other shows or things about other conditions. But
I was gonna say that becomes a little bit too common as to what you're saying. Hey, the truth is stretched a little bit when it goes from real life to the screen to the stage. So I love to hear that you cared enough to make sure you wanted to be accurate.
That was important. I sort of learned. I remember being told that, and I had a conversation about my father. There was a play called "The Boy in the Bathroom" by Michael Luberis that was being a musical, at the ASCAP workshop about someone with, I don't know if it was ADD or some compulsive disorder. I don't remember exactly the condition, but Stephen Schwartz asked the writer point blank, "Did you research this? If someone has a person in their family with this condition or a professional who knows it, will they say they're just using this as a prop, or will they say they hit it on the mark?" Because that makes so much of a difference. And then the writer said they researched it. And I took that to heart. And, and then, 20 or 10 years, 10 years later, when I started to write this, I that echoed in my mind. And I remember talking to my father about that play because he was still in, he was still all there at that time. And he was interested in that subject, being a psychiatrist. So, and I made sure I did that to get the message out and for it to be a good musical. Because I know what people say when musical is making stuff up. So
Right. No, it's huge. I think two things you mentioned really hard that hit here. Obviously, the whole point of the podcast for a majority, the power of music is huge. We talk about that on the LMJ side with our community campaign where we allow senior facilities in our area and we give them a budget of $1,500 and we buy things for residents. How many of the things that are on there are music related because of that brain stimulation and the happiness that that they see from residents there. And then number two, and it's the part that I always say when I never like to sound selfish, but what it comes down to is the person who has Alzheimer's, unfortunately, doesn't know. And it's all the people that are around them that experience a loss. And I always go to I always say that my mom died twice. And what I mean is when she forgot who I was, and then number two, when she passed away. It was
my son said that same thing. He said, "Oh, it's hard to mourn that this film because he lost him when he didn't recognize him, and that is that is hard. But every once in a while, you get a little thing of memory,
glimpse, a small glimpse,
and you lose them." And thank God with my father, maybe it didn't go so long because he didn't die of Alzheimer's, things just deteriorating. It was an infection. So it didn't go on for a decade,
Right.
It could have been worse.
No, totally. Eric, I got to say, thank you for all the wisdom you shared. Thank you for your genuineness, your transparency. It really is appreciated. And it really, we want our audience to know there's so many different ways that you can take this experience. So number one, if anyone wants to learn more about Eric, talked a little bit about what he's looking for moving forward there. Again, it's Eric Sirota. His email is eric@ericsirota.com, or you can find him at www.ericsirota.com. That's Eric, ERIC. Sirota is SIROTA. And as always, if you ever want to find any information out about LMJs, we are at www.lostsoulsandalz.org. Eric, thank you again for your time here. Thank you for being with me, allowing me to learn a lot about you and allowing our audience to now learn so much more about you as well. So want to say thank you, major kudos for being so awesome with me. As a reminder, this is a monthly podcast. I would love to connect with people in this space to join me in the studio or join me virtually all the way from on the other side of the country. If you know someone who has a connection to Alzheimer's disease research, dementia, or is a supporter of it in any way, love to make a connection there. And as always, thanks for joining us today on Remembering Together, the LMJ's Lost Souls podcast. I hope the information shared today was beneficial and impactful. And most importantly, love your family, love your friends, and remember to cherish the time you spend with the ones you love, because at the end of the day, all we have is memories. Thank you.